I like to drive to the mountains once a week for my music and like to take some pens for sketching. Once one leaks, will it always leak or is it a hit and miss thing? Okay, so I got to read into your question here a little bit. You mentioned the mountains, so I'm guessing you have some elevation change going on. This is going to be a similar effect to if you're flying. Now I have a video on flying. It's called Fountain Pen 101, Flying with Fountain Pens or something like that. I should have looked up the name ahead of time, but look up Fountain Pen 101 Flying and you'll find it. The principle behind that is if you have a pen and you are changing elevation, specifically going from a lower elevation to a higher elevation, okay, you're decreasing in pressure, in atmospheric pressure as you go higher. And what happens there is the air that is inside your pen is staying at a higher pressure. The atmospheric pressure is dropping. So when you have higher pressure in your pen, lower atmospheric pressure, it's going to want to equalize. So if you have your nib pointed up, you're going to be pretty much okay no matter what your scenario, because your ink is going to be hanging down at the bottom. You're going to have air up here by your nib. The only place for air to go is out the nib when there's a higher pressure inside the pen and a lower atmospheric pressure. So it's going to go up, and you might get a little spatter here and there if your nib was really saturated before you started traveling, but you're not going to get a big leak. If you have your pen on the side or nib pointed down and you have like your ink level's a little lower and you have a decent air pocket in here, that's where you can start to see some leaking, burping, whatever you want to call it. And the bigger the pen you have, the bigger the ink capacity of the pen and the more air that is in there, the bigger the leak, your potential for your leak could be, specifically for changing elevations like this. Now, it's not as big a deal coming from the mountains going back down to wherever you are, because you're increasing in pressure, and as the atmospheric pressure increases, it's wanting to push pressure into the pen, so it's not going to cause leaking quite as much. So not really an issue there. It's more when you're going from a lower to a higher elevation. So pretty much your solution is keep your nib pointed up if you can. And if you have it in like a laptop bag or a backpack or something like that, just make sure you keep all your pens with the nibs up and keep your backpack kind of standing up, and you really won't have a problem. I actually hear about leaking way less than you would probably expect in this kind of situation. Another thing you can do to help is either keep the pen completely full of ink or completely empty. Now I'm guessing for you it'd probably be better to keep it completely full, because if you're going to the mountains, you're not going to want to like bring your bottle of ink and then, you know, go on your hike or whatever it is that you're doing and like filling your pen as you go. You're probably going to want to fill your pens before you go, but think about it, if you have it full of ink, you might be like, oh my gosh, all the ink is going to leak out. Oh my gosh, it's going to be terrible. Not necessarily, okay? So if you have a lot of ink in the pen and no air, then it doesn't really matter if the pressure changes, because ink is mostly water. Water cannot increase or decrease in volume or pressure on its own. So you can try to increase it, but there's a word for it. I don't know, science, but you can't like pressurize water. So it's only gonna change in pressure as much air as you have in there. So if you keep it filled up with ink, you're going to be actually in better shape than you would if it was half full, if that makes sense to you. So that I think is going to be your ticket. But specifically kind of to answer your follow-up question there, like once it leaks, is it always going to leak or anything? I think yours is a situational thing. Certainly some pens have more of a potential for leaking, so if it's the first time it's leaked, if you emulate the exact circumstances again, surely it could leak again. But it's not like the pen has like been broken or something and it never leaked and now it's broken so it's always going to leak. No, it's more about the conditions that the pen are in than it is about like something has changed within the pen. Does that make sense? So no, the fact that your pen has leaked once doesn't mean it's going to leak in more situations. It just means that in that specific scenario it could leak again. So you just want to do some preventative things like I mentioned to keep it from happening again. Sweet.